Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning from the Asia Pacific. Good evening if you're joining us, of course, from other regions in the US. If you're in Europe, why are you still awake? But still, thank you for staying up late. My name is David Ingles. I'm with Bloomberg TV. I'll be your moderator for this panel today. And essentially what we're going to be talking about here, and I'll be introducing our panelists in just a few seconds here, is really to understand what it means to drive an inclusive recovery as it pertains to Southeast Asia's tourism recovery, and certainly one that has really been battered by the pandemic. In some sense, a silver lining could be this could be a reset opportunity to really get us in the right direction, in the right manner, and the right method. To help us understand where we go from here, we are joined, as you can see probably on your screens right now, our esteemed panel of guests here. Let me introduce them one by one. Vinny Wicklein, he's with the ADB, he's Deputy Director General there with the Southeast Asia Department. Joining us too is Liz Ortiguera. She's the CEO, Pacific Asia Travel Association, or PATA. Caecilia Chu, co-founder and CEO of YouTrip, brings a very interesting perspective, of course, to all of this. Established her company just a few years, and then the pandemic hit, so we'll see how they pivoted there. And joining us in a few minutes is the Minister of Tourism for Indonesia, Minister Uno, who will be rejoining us, of course. Now, I guess before we get to the opening statements of our panelists, let me just sort of set the scene where we are here. At least from our perspective, and I work at Bloomberg and we look at data, and it's sort of our job to understand the depths of the economic damage from the pandemic and the pace at which probably will come out of it. When you look at Southeast Asia and in our situation, for example, last year, I was talking with several economists on the region, and really when you ask them to assign a GDP growth target for each economy, for some economies, they had a rather high degree of confidence. For others, like Thailand, for example, it was almost that they were afraid to come out with a projection. And the reason I bring that up is for economies like Thailand, for example, which disproportionately are a little bit more exposed to the tourism industry, the question for these economists was really binary, right? Are the borders going to open? Are they not going to open? Because that determines where the economy goes for that year. The other example I'd like to bring up, and this is going to make sense in a few seconds here, the mainland Chinese market, very important market to really tourism markets everywhere in the world. And a lot of economists had trouble deciphering why the Chinese currency, for the most part of last year, was not just strong, it was extremely strong. And then when we started to piece it back together, something took place that, something was present that was not present in the previous 10 years. Millions of Chinese were stuck at home. They could not fly out, they could not bring all their money, they could not do all the shopping. So quite literally, them being stuck at home changed the entire macroeconomic picture of China and flipped the current account, which is why you had a very strong currency. I'll end on this before I bring in the rest of the panel. Yesterday on the show, we were speaking with the ADB, our hosts, of course, for today. And essentially, we're talking about the growth recovery in Southeast Asia. And certainly, I'm just going to lay out some statistics here that we mentioned. In terms of the people in the region that the pandemic pushed into extreme poverty, 5 million. The number of jobs lost, more than 9 million. So you do understand the hole we're in. And the temptation really to get out of this is as urgent. And where is that line to reopen? And to reopen properly is a very tricky proposition right now when it's lives and livelihoods at stake. So at the moment, we will be starting with our opening statement. And I can see, of course, the minister has joined us right now, who, in the order of things. Thank you. Good morning for joining us. We will begin, I guess. Liz, why don't you get us started with an opening statement, maybe a brief introduction, who you are and what you guys do. Liz.
Great, thank you. Hi, I'm Liz Ortiguera, and I'm the recently instated new CEO of PATA as of mid last year. PATA is, its mission is to catalyze the responsible development of travel and tourism to, from, and within the Asia Pacific. And certainly, part of our mission right now has been around supporting our members who constitute both public and private entities, supporting them in the recovery as well as the sustainable, responsible future.
Okay, Caecilia?
Hi, my name is Caecilia. I'm the co-founder and CEO of YouTrip. So in 2018, we are actually the first company to launch multi-currency travel wallet for consumers. And not only it gives you the best FX rates in the app, but also it synchronizes with the MasterCard, so you can really spend anywhere, online and offline, without any hassle around foreign exchange and the worries about the fees. Now, obviously, the pandemic hit us shortly after we launched. We really have taken the chance to transform ourselves, and how I call it is to become a truly pandemic resilient company. Now we have altogether processed about $2 billion US in terms of transaction volumes on our platform. And at this critical juncture of the time, as all the travel industry and also the region is really emerging from the pandemic, hopefully again. And I think it's just an incredibly exciting time for us. And as a company, we're very much just getting started. So thank you for having us here.
And we'll obviously be very interested to see how you pandemic-proofed your company and perhaps how, to borrow a phrase, how you scaled it down really for all the SMEs to do the same, because we were really caught off guard by this, weren't we? Minister Uno, thank you for joining us on the show. Let me bring you in, sir. Maybe just a brief introduction, how you've been, what you guys have been busy with, and what is the state really of the tourism industry there?
Well, from very beautiful weather in Nusa Dua, Bali, the site of the upcoming G20 and many other international events. I'd like to thank for inviting me to this very exciting discussions on sustainable solutions for Southeast Asia's recovery. And we just reopened Bali, and we just reinstate visa on arrival and quarantine-free travel for Liz and for Caecilia and for Winfried also to come to Bali. And things are definitely looking prospective, although we need to still be very cautious, and we will take incremental baby steps. We want to make sure that this is going to be sustainable. It's going to be gradual, but as we prepare for G20, we want to make sure we don't make any slight room for error. We need to make sure that the pandemic is handled, and we keep the number of cases low and our health facilities ready. So things are looking good, but still cautiously watching data. Scientific data is key. Indonesia is installing this widespread sprawling digital coverage on the applications of Peduli Lindungi to make sure that the testing and tracing continue to be the focus, as well as reviving the economy. So I'd like to use this symposium to actually also promote that we'll be hosting some of the major world events in Bali and other parts of Indonesia, and we would like to welcome you to our wonderful Indonesia.
We'll be there if we can. And you bring up a very good point on technology, for one, which is the topic of conversation we'll be having, really the role of technology and help spread the wealth into the smaller SMEs too. And to the other point on, and I'm glad you mentioned, the cautious approach to reopening, right? If policy is and should be based on science, policy should not change as quickly and as much, because this underlying science really doesn't really change. It's under our understanding, I guess, of it that determines that. Vinny, let me bring you in some opening statements, sir.
Thank you, David, and it's good to see you, Sandy, Minister, and again, and Caecilia, Liz. Thank you so much for joining the panel and having me on the panel. Let me just maybe start by re-emphasizing the importance of tourism on Southeast Asia's economy. Pre-COVID, as you know, tourism contributed more than 12% to the region's GDP. The importance of tourism for employment and livelihoods. It did employ more than 40 million workers, and the majority of which women and SMEs. And the impact has been very severe now. You mentioned, David, some of the rather horrible numbers in terms of increase in poverty, severe poverty, in terms of job losses, etc. But on the positive side, tourism will be part of the recovery, a very important part of the recovery because of the above, because of the importance of the economy and jobs. And I think COVID in some ways will be an opportunity also to, as bad as it has been, but to recover and to build back better in an environmentally sustainable fashion. So we can address some of the structural issues that we've always wanted to address, and just basically start from new the right way. But greening will also have a cost. So financing will be important. And countries need to attract investments and use innovative financing approaches, particularly also because the fiscal situation in many countries has been is not that prosperous because of the support provided during the pandemic to the people, to the economy. So COVID recovery funding can be smartly used to build back better and greener. And some of the new and innovative funding mechanism that blend public and private and concessional funding together. A final point, maybe just a pitch also on the soft launch yesterday of the Southeast Asia Sustainable Tourism Hub of the Asian Development Bank, which will help develop and finance innovative tourism projects, will help promote tourism PPPs, build tourism destination management capacity, and also will support on some of the technologies that we will talk about later today. Thank you.
Okay, yes, actually, Vinny, if you don't mind, the nature of me and my journalistic self needs to ask you a follow-up then on that. Could you talk a little bit more about that program? Because that does seem to hit at the core of what we need in terms of financing and being able to do that properly in partnership with the government.
Yeah, so the tourism hub is helps builds on ADB support in infrastructure and tourism infrastructure, tourism management, tourism financing. It will help develop tourism projects. One of the issues in development finance in the region has been the lack of bankable projects. So this facility, through technical assistance by the ADB, will help develop and structure projects that are bankable for the private sector. It will help governments develop and design suitable projects, and it will bring in knowledge and best practice from this region, from other regions as well. It will also help provide access to some of the green finance mechanisms and green finance facilities that we have in the ADB, and that are more generally, more broadly, also beyond the ADB, available in the region.
Understood. Vinny, thank you. Now, I guess at this point in time, it would be fairly useful to understand, before we can talk about a recovery, we have to understand our starting point, where exactly we are here compared to the depths of the crisis. And, Caecilia, Liz, and Minister Una, I'd like to bring you in on this next question. From your vantage points, whether that's arrivals, a sentiment among your members or transactions, what are you seeing? Where do you think we are relative to the worst parts in these last few years? Caecilia, let me start with you.
So, that's a very interesting question. And because we're in the consumer transaction processing, so we actually see pretty real-time data in terms of, where people are going, where people are spending, kind of where their mind share is. And, I would say that I think since the end of February, we actually see a huge increase in terms of cross-border spending. I think both in terms of, consumer just spending more and feeling more confident about the economy, but also the travel is really coming back up. I wouldn't say, we're even 10% in terms of where we are in terms of travel compared to pre-pandemic level. But I definitely see that coming up every day. So that's what I'm seeing in the data.
Okay, Liz, let me bring you in. Sentiment among your members, how has it been? What are you hearing? Liz, I think you're on mute, just in case.
Sorry, thank you.
There we go.
What we're seeing is that the recovery is starting, but it's quite uneven. And I think that there are a lot of evolutions that are happening in travel. Longer journeys, multi-purpose. Certainly, there is the navigation of policies and the different degrees of opening that are happening across our region. And certainly the source markets are shifting around. The original source with the region waiting for China international travel to open up, they've been seeking other source markets, and the geopolitical situation is also shifting that. But I think I'm very much a optimist and opportunist. I think that you will see great success stories. Maldives is one in particular, and there is opportunity, there's pent-up demand, and there are silver linings to the pandemic. I think we'll be able to see a better form of travel evolving, and it's this leadership team and others that will encourage that.
Understood. Minister Uno, if I could bring you in, sir, in terms of, do you have specific objectives for your sector this year? I'd leave it up to you what you use for those metrics and just your priorities again to get us underway.
The number looks quite challenging, but we're moving away from numbers. We're moving away from quantity. We're focusing on quality and sustainability. We used to have 17 million or so foreign tourists coming in. We're now only at about 2 to 3 million. So it's like a huge collapse of numbers. But we're moving into longer length of stay, ecotourism, sports tourism, creative economy products. In terms of jobs, we're actually better last year. We added 1.2 million new jobs in the creative economy sectors and in tourism. So we are now back to about 34, 35 million all jobs created within the two sectors. And particularly in the creative economy side, in the applications, technology, gaming, and also the digital economy, we've been able to create, other than jobs, also the economic impact. So we're now number 3 after US obviously with Hollywood, and Korea with K-pop and all the Korean dramas. We're now number 3 in terms of contributions of creative economy into our national economy. So now I believe that what ADB is saying, that we will recover with a new economic order. It's no longer the pre-pandemic ways. Travel will be fully on I would say cleanliness, health, safety, and most importantly, environmental sustainability. We will focus on nature and culture, and I think we could do it together. And together with the G20 theme of recover together, recover stronger, we will be able to build the economy better.
I mean, on that note, I'd just like to put this question to the panel. Opening up, but in a different way, in some sense, does that bring up the cost of doing business? And in what way does that bring it up? And certainly the reason I bring that up, we were just having a conversation here at Bloomberg with several of the hotel CEOs here, Hong Kong, Shanghai hotels, the Rosewoods of the world. And certainly, one of their priorities is obviously keeping both their staff and their clients and their visitors safe. And obviously there's a cost component to that. I'm wondering from your perspective, should stakeholders in the industry prepare for their costs to structurally go up? Let me start with you, Vinny.
Well, look, I mean, I think the structural change will be there, and I think yesterday there was some at this symposium. There were some interesting discussions about also about the job creation. If tourists can be convinced to stay a little bit longer, and so you have less tourists that stay longer and that buy more local, and there are more local activities that that are being provided, that will be good for everybody. That will be good for the people. That will be good for the tourism companies, and that will be good for the environment.
Liz?
Yes, absolutely. I think that, similarly, I'm seeing the same trends as my colleagues. And I think that, certainly driven by consumer interests as well. They want to see more conscious travel moving into the future. And the research has showed that. And driven from both the governments, supporting things like community tourism development, creative tourism, as well as from the consumer. I think this all bodes well for the industry.
Okay, Caecilia, I guess let me rephrase that for you in the context of your company too. In what way does technology, and you are a tech company, of course, that tries to mimic this, what role does tech play in helping us achieve this sort of sustainable growth path?
Yeah. So, when we think about the nature of tourism, it's actually a hugely global industry. So, I think for us, we long believe that technology has really a key role to play in terms of unlocking new opportunities for small businesses. So, I think two aspects are particularly interesting to us. One is, when we think about the small businesses within the tourism industry, I think a large part of the job is really to get the words out, to really build that reputation, ideally internationally. And I think the internet really offers the opportunity to do so. And there are so many practical steps that they can actually take, putting up a digital storefront, advertising on, the global platforms. I think there's so many things that small businesses can tap on in order to unlock new opportunities. And of course, from YouTrip perspective, right, I think digitalizing the payment transaction, it's really a key one. What we have seen is, we're really having sort of a front row seat to actually see that by reducing the time and cost for doing payment transactions, what it does for the buyers and sellers is that, hopefully the buyers can buy more service, and for the merchants, the sellers can, hopefully spend more time and energy to really find growth instead of, handling a lot of cash. So I think the whole sustainability to us, it's also very relevant. One thing is we try to digitalize as much of our process as possible to make it paperless as a starting point. And I think, by digitalizing more of the businesses in the region, I think it's certainly helped to reduce the transaction cost, time, and really help everyone do a bit more business.
Liz, let me bring you in because I know you have some thoughts on this too. In what way are your members, I guess it's an understatement that they are adopting technology, but what are the sort of priorities right now? If you could give some insight on that.
I think certainly, one area that everyone is learning fast is to enhance their digital marketing. That's one. And I think that in terms of recovery solutions, technology can play a really critical role. I worked, before PATA, I worked in the area of education technology, and the Singapore government supported mobile first education. And as a support to the impacted travel and tourism industry workers. And I think this is a very, it's a low cost and democratic way to reach people that don't necessarily have a laptop, because our sector really is a lot of frontline lower income workers that deliver great service. And so, it's important to do an outreach and support them. And technology can play a critical role in upskilling and reskilling staff members, particularly in complex issues like health and safety and learning to market yourself online. That's very critical to in terms of driving inclusiveness in terms of the recovery.
Minister Uno, if I could bring you in here, really just on the implications of, in Indonesia, a very good example, I would imagine. I'm from the Philippines, by the way, just in case. And, I can't imagine it being very, very different.
Maraming salamat.
Mabuhay din po. A lot of really what appeals to foreign tourists is, the character of the place. And the character really comes from the small businesses. I'm wondering, from your perspective, and you sit in Jakarta, for example, and if I'm not mistaken, you have 15 or maybe 17,000 islands. How does the government support the smallest of the smallest parts of your tourism industry? What does it mean from a policy perspective?
Okay, first of all, the smallest of the smallest will go and say in Tagalog, "Ako ang kinang bukasang. Tulungan mo ako, mabuhay."
Excellent. I'm
So-
Filipina too.
Love it.
How's my Tagalog?
Better than mine.
Better than mine.
Anyway, I think the smallest of the smallest. I mean, this is a K-shaped recovery, as you know, guys, and this the people who adopted technology actually is doing better than pre-pandemic. And village tourism that we are developing seen a 30% increase. Homestay occupancy also went up 27%. But the people who have not embraced technology, even from the lowest to the highest, actually struggle to fill in occupancy rate. I see hotels in Bali still within like the 30% ish, and they still doing buffet. Come on, guys. Buffet in this era, people don't go for buffets. I mean, they're still wasting a lot of food. I think the new way of doing business in hospitality and accommodations, people eat by themselves and eat very limited amount, so you don't have to waste so much wastage in bringing up the cost structure. So I've been telling them, I used to run hotels also in my previous life before I joined the government. I said, you lower your cost structure, and although you have a much lower revenue, at least you still have a margin to survive, because cash flow during this difficult time is like your blood, your oxygen. You need cash flow, and therefore you need to bring down the cost structure. So the lowest of the lowest is going to be touched by government through empowerment program. So tourism village program, like in the 17,000 islands, we have now 3,000 village that we will empower through village tourism, community-based tourism. We'd like them to also push local creative economy products. When people come there, they consume local food. They buy like the headgear that I'm wearing. And also, this is a new way of quality tourism, whereby it impacts the local communities. So I would say this recovery will be a different kind of recovery. I think the tourist market, as they come and ready to come to Bali, as we reopen the international flights, quarantine free, I think it will be more, I would say, conscious. They want to see, we even offer them a zero carbon or net carbon free travel. So when they arrive in Jakarta, see that they have wasted so many carbons because of they fly in. So we offer them activities such as mangrove planting, waste management, and empowering the local communities to offset their carbon footprint. So yeah, I think I'm very excited when I'd like to work with Bloomberg. I think Bloomberg will have a conference here alongside G20, and hopefully, oh, by the way, ADB, our first vice president ADB from Indonesia is now the head of our new capital authority body. So yeah, we're very excited, and I think if we do it together, destinations will improve, and also quality of activities.
Minister, we just have some questions coming through from the audience. I'm guessing these are also directed at you, sir, if I could. I'll combine the two if you could. So how can we ensure confidence that the measures you're putting in place will ensure, I guess, the safety of travelers? That's one part of the question. And the other part is, are there certain thresholds that you need to see before completely opening up quarantine-free travel?
Our top concern is your safety and security. Your health is our utmost, is of utmost importance for us. So we're treating this on a very urgent basis. We're watching the RT number. We're watching the health protocol very disciplined, very strict. We're imposing now QR code check-in for destinations as well as centers for creative economy. We want the use of these applications, which is going to be, I guess, part of the new economy, to be able, the new testing and tracing, we just talked to Abbott. They will also have this self-test widespread using of local products also that we're developing. So again, we will do this on an incremental baby steps. We don't want to take a major opening up and then we have to claw back and go back to the lockdown. But we want to do this on a gradual basis, and we don't mind if it's going to take some time as long as we will be heading into the right direction.
I guess time is in a strange way in favor because we want to sort of do the, go on this road in a sustainable manner. Caecilia, I'll bring you in here because from a business perspective and someone who oversees one and was hit by the pandemic and has had to change strategy immediately after you launched, how did you change your strategy? And, moving forward, and knock on wood, we don't get to another one, how have you pandemic-proofed your business?
Yeah, so, I would say love to really share our perspective as a travel business. And obviously, pandemic has changed our dynamics hugely. So before COVID, 70-80% of our business volumes all come through travel. But I think we have gone through a phase where at first, when it first started, we are kind of watching the news every day. We are sort of, holding our breath, hoping that things will turn around real soon. And obviously that did not happen. And so, I think the key for us now is really to be a pandemic resilient company. And how we do that, it's, on the consumer portfolio front, we are really focusing on sharpening our new use cases. So, we have really focused on online shopping. We are really focused on online gaming, online education, some of these new segments and use cases for us. And, I'm just very proud to share that now our business volumes have exceeded our pre-pandemic level without travel, but with a completely new transaction mix in the online spending, being 70-80% of our business today. But also we are not just stopping here. Like as a business, what we learned through the pandemic is to be truly agile, creative, and optimistic. So what we have also done is to actually launch a SME version of our product. So, what we believe is, this is something quite peculiar with the Southeast Asia region, is that many businesses are actually very global, at least pan-regional in nature. And so they actually have a lot of Forex, cross-border payment needs. And so we're actually launching an SME version next month, which we believe will help a lot of SME to not only save, on the FX cost, but really to save them time by automating some of their workflows so that they can spend their energy to find growth in the post-pandemic world. So we are very, very excited about that.
And Liz, I'll bring you in here. I mean, Caecilia's standpoint in some strange way is, well, it's easier and it's harder to pivot because she's just started, but she's a tech company too, right? So in a lot of ways, it's easier for her to change her focus. But for your members, for example, that have one single focus as a sort of bread and butter, how do you pandemic proof something that, disproportionately gets hit when borders are closed?
Well, first of all, ministries across the region, when the pandemic hit and they couldn't open up borders, they developed their domestic travel. And even in a market as small as Singapore, I saw cottage industry emerging. The government was supporting it and promoting it. And certainly the spend was there. I just met with the National Museum and they said their traffic went up. And, so that was very, of course, critical. And we're seeing markets like, China has a thriving economy right now with their domestic tourism. That said, there is still a pent up demand for international travel as and when it opens. So I think it's, there are many, many ways to innovate. And I think that, certainly catering to new types of tourists, whether it's domestic or it's new cultures, it may be new primary, secondary source markets. I think that moving down to the SME and to the frontline level is critical to teach people to adapt and find opportunities. It really is, it's an obstacle course for everyone right now. But I think if you keep your eye on where there's opportunity, you can find it.
Minister, let me bring you in. We know you have a hard out, so I'd like to give you the opportunity, just some final
Thank
words,
you.
and also if you could touch on maybe there is pent-up demand. There's a lot of damage in this economy. You've touched on the need to stagger this properly. There is a temptation to just open up and simply just get that cash back in. Just some final thoughts, sir.
Well, thank you again for having me on this great panel. I'm very optimistic that this year will be the recovery year, and it will be an event-led recovery because events would allow us to calibrate what type of participants coming in, as well as the health protocol requirements to be imposed. G20 will, because we will have world leaders, will set a benchmark of how future events will be done post-pandemic. The MotoGP is here in Indonesia this week, and I'm heading to Mandalika in Lombok. This is going to be the first major event with 60,000 spectators. So we will see this very, very data carefully. We want to make sure that the RT number and also the spread of new BA2 variants will not happen because we definitely still in a pandemic stage. As we transition into the new economy, we will need to make sure that we don't go back to the time that we have to handle Delta. Delta taught us so much. It cost the country a great deal. I think we lost not only lives, but also we lost close to 2% of our economic growth last year, which translates to millions of new jobs. So I'd like to remind everybody here, let's work together. We recover together, we recover stronger, and we rebuild better. Thank you very much, and I'm taking my leave now.
Mr. Uno, thank you so much. We wish you all the luck. Good luck with G20 there, of course. I'm wondering if someone in G20 is going to be attending. That's for a different conversation, of course. Okay. All right.
That's a very good parting comment. Yes.
I had to look at my G20 list just now.
Yeah, we hope, war is bad for travel. Okay, war is bad for tourism, definitely. But I hope we de-escalate, and by time of G20, everybody will be honky-dory, and we will sing Kumbaya together in Bali.
Thank you so much, sir. We'll let you go. We know you have a hard out. Let's continue the conversation, guys. So Liz, Caecilia, and Vinny. Vinny, let me bring you back in here. On that same note, there is an opportunity here because we have a reset. My concern is when I was looking at the theme of today's panel was, us, Bloomberg, ADB, a lot of the companies, it's easy for us to talk about ESG, sustainability. I'm just wondering how that resonates really on the ground when you talk about SMEs. What does that mean to them? Should they care? Can they care? How do they care?
Yeah, well, and just to extend the question a little bit, how can we make sure, I suppose, that the tourism recovery will restore some of these jobs and livelihoods that you mentioned in the very beginning, that have been hit so hard. So just on that question, even before the pandemic, tourism and hospitality industry were struggling at times to find qualified staff because it's seasonal. The pay is not always competitive. So the challenge then is not only to restore jobs, but also to improve livelihoods, right? So maybe three points to make on jobs and livelihoods. And the first one, green means jobs. There's lots of evidence that eco investments have a much higher job multiplier, create much more jobs than non-eco investments. So investments in tourism and in green tourism will have a very positive impact on tourism and on jobs. tourism jobs. Secondly, there is quite a bit of focus now on inclusive and sustainable tourism projects also. So we are, for example, supporting community-based tourism projects. One recently in Cambodia, for example, that help generate local jobs and income opportunities. So, infrastructure, tourism services infrastructure, helping communities enhance the visitor experience, strengthen the supply chain linkages, etc. And then the third point, on the policy side, in some ways a pity that Minister Sandiaga has left, but we know that the governments are trying to get their head around education and training programs. So we are supporting some countries, and there's a lot going on generally in education training. It was before the pandemic, but now, especially in the tourism sector, that is important. But also the participation of industry in social security and insurance schemes as well, particularly important for small businesses and groups like self-employed women, ethnic groups, etc. And thirdly, how do we incentivize businesses to invest more in training and retaining employees, right? So I think like tax reliefs, etc., for firms that invest in human capital development could be considered. So there's a bunch of tools available that are now being looked at and should be looked at.
And Caecilia, let me bring you in on that point. Again, we have to keep going back to this because technology really is what gives us access both ways, right? Whether you're the client to the vendor and all the way back. From your perspective, as somewhat, I guess, as a medium, in between that, what efforts are you or have you undertaken in terms of just educating your stakeholders around you of the need for your service, for example?
So, I think, we have really, learned a lot through the pandemic, especially, the fact that we need to kind of undertake a pivot action. So I think digitalize ourselves, digitalize all our workflows and marketing, to Lisa earlier point, it's truly important to us. Pre-pandemic, we actually do a lot more offline activities, whether we are out on the street or on a billboard, and now we are really focusing on the digital piece of it. And, and I think what it does also is to help us think about our company ambition in a much more global way. One thing that the pandemic has also changed the way we think about our organization is that, we discovered that we can all do pretty productive work all remotely. And, I certainly see that a lot of companies are working in a hybrid work from home arrangements. And, I'm not sure whether any of these would actually go back to the 9 to 6, 5 days a week, old way of working. So I think when that happens, the concept of border becomes a lot more blurred. And, what that does is to help us think about our end market, right? To your point, our buyers, merchants on our platform, our end markets a lot more globally. And we try to reach them in digital ways. And what that does is really to make us become a lot more globally ambitious as a company. So, I think if anything, the pandemic has really made us realize how creative, agile we could be, but also always remain optimistic.
And, let me bring you in here again, Liz. I mean, and I guess the minister's not here anymore to chime in on this, but, a very good point that you brought up in, our pre-panel conversations. And a very good example is Airbnb, right? The ability for these small businesses to suddenly take an asset, monetize it, but there's the policy gap where the government then goes, that's taxable, isn't it? Where are you guys on that? How do you feel in terms of that policy gap? What are you needing from governments essentially to make that a little bit more sustainable?
Well, I'd say I've seen both sides of the argument regarding, for example, Airbnb coming into the market and, the amount of revenues that it can bring into community. And so I think that in general, the industry will move towards these longer stay designed properties. That's what the consumer wants. They want the workation. They want to have multiple purposes when they travel to make it more efficient, and so that'll be a knock-on effect. I think that it'll be on the onus of each government to look at how can they put in the right, whether it's insurance or tax policies, to support the sustainable form of travel that will bring funds back into the community, that will support SMEs, and in general, be more sustainable for the local culture and the local economy.
That's very interesting. What's happening here in Hong Kong, and just to interject, really on the ground here, right? So the pandemic started this part of the world. It kind of disappeared for 2 years. So domestically, things were okay. And then we had this Omicron surge, and certainly the government was not prepared for it in many ways. So what's really happened is people have gotten confused, locals and expats. And to your point, they've left, whether that's temporary, and what temporary means, weeks, months, or maybe years. But there's been an exodus really of people out of Hong Kong, because people have realized you can work pretty much from anywhere. I mean, I'm in my living room right now and I'm broadcasting my shows. Caecilia, do you think there is some permanence to these longer stays, for example, and to your strategy? Do you think there is also some permanence in how you changed your strategy?
Yeah, I really love this longer stays. Also to my earlier point, actually, I think as companies are becoming, much more hybrid, remote, in a way, geographically distributed, I actually think that gives employees more flexibility. And that gives rise to some longer stay, and I think it's a really good thing. I think what I observed through the pandemic, which is really to my pleasant surprises, there was no loss in productivity. At least from a technology company standpoint, we have always been wired to work, pretty remotely and from home on the cloud, using all our software, and I think for the technology sector, if I look at all my left and right, everyone on the team, I would say, people are really adapting quite well. But having said that, I would say that, going forward, I think the key demand driver for travel, not just the flexible stay and longer stay of employees, but I think it's really that pent up need for human connections. I think it's really that pent up need and desire to meet people face to face. Like for me, I think I just couldn't wait to. Just now the minister has already dropped off, but I would love this. I can't wait to go to Bali. It's some of these places that really give people inspiration and motivation to do more productive work. So I think I'm really optimistic in terms of the travel comeback this year, and I think there are many drivers that give us very good demand going forward.
Liz, you want to chime in on that?
Yes, I was actually just looking at this question that was just posted about luxury tourism.
Yeah, why don't we just answer that too? Go ahead. Do
you mind if I talk to that? Yeah. So I'd love to mention that there is a new type of intelligent luxury, and the new type of traveler, the more modern, responsible traveler, is one that looks more deeply. It's not just doing an Instagram tour to take a photo in a much traveled location just to get a very superficial introduction, but it's intelligent luxury, and that means wellness for the self, for the community, and also for the environment. So it's like a holistic wellness. It's a much more inclusive and sustainable offering, both for the host country as well as the traveler. And I think that that's really important for us to both develop and also for travelers to seek when they return to the skies and come back to the region.
Right. And Liz, do you think then some of these changes, my suspicion based on the tone of our conversation, it seems as if there's a semi-permanence to it. And the reason I simply bring that up is, these last year or so, the phrase, when are you back to pre-pandemic levels? Do we use the same metrics to measure if we are back to pre-pandemic levels, or does this sector look, I wouldn't say completely different, but, in many ways, scale, capacity, the number of employed people, for example, does this look the same as it did, 2-3 years ago?
No, I think it'll completely be different. In the past, it was, much more singular around visitor arrivals. when you heard Minister Uno talk about actually, there's the yield per traveler, making sure that those dollars that do come in are going into the community as well and staying with the local economy. I think the metrics need to evolve. And I think that having the right metrics, it will also have us as leaders steer in the right direction in terms of what to encourage. It won't just be about heavy traffic, and we don't want that actually. We want dispersion. We want longer stays. We want, and new forms of travel will emerge. Minister Uno talked about event-led. Now with the distributed workforce, we're going to see that bringing the team together in one location, maybe at the headquarters or maybe offsite, is a new type of event. The reconnection of the virtual teams. So I think that it will evolve in many ways, and the metrics need to reflect and encourage that.
Vinny, there's a comment that just came through on this topic that we mentioned on this policy gap in taxation. And essentially, I'll just try and summarize this. That there are many small enterprises out there that are in jeopardy because of just how the gray area of the policy for the government. Am I taxed? Do I get taxed? Do I get tax forgiveness? While we try and figure out this recovery, Vinny, do you think, and pity that the minister isn't here to defend himself or the government side of things, do you think the government should step aside in whatever manner that means and let this recovery first take place before thinking about things like taxation, for example?
Well, I don't think the government should step aside totally because we have an opportunity now to rebuild better, right? But what I think, there's maybe there's a case we made for some sandbox type approaches, but I think important to bring in good practice to help governments think that through. And in fact, the comment, I fully strongly agree that we should sit down with governments and help them strengthen the regulatory framework and help them think it through. In fact, the commentator is in fact the ADB colleague who is running the Sustainable Tourism Hub for Southeast Asia. So let's take him up on it and out and see whether we can do some bring in some experts and advise the region, the governments in the region on those issues.
Send him the Zoom link. Let's see if he can chime in too. In terms of the job recovery, then, Vinny, should we have the same expectations? Are we going to return? Are we going to see the same number of jobs come in? To Liz's earlier point, or is that not a good metric that serves as a guide?
Well, I hope we will see the tourism sector as as a booming sector, but in a better way, in a greener, more sustainable way as before. So we hope that that the jobs are coming back, and they should be coming back. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of policy support that can be done. Including regulatory support, as we just discussed. There are projects that we can help communities, particularly communities with. Minister Sandiaga mentioned very localized stays, homestays, etc. A lot of support could be provided there by governments, by others, by private sector. And last not least, I'm extremely optimistic about the green means jobs opportunity and the opportunity that green financing provides to finance tourism-related projects that are sustainable.
Before I get some final thoughts, a follow-up on that then, Vinny, from a top-level perspective, ADB to governments, for example, and that sort of financing, because that's beyond really, frankly, a lot of small businesses. What is your gauge, really, of how receptive governments are to this sort of thing? Simply beyond, I'm going to raise a green bond, and who knows where I'll spend the money, that sort of thing.
Extremely. There's a huge momentum in the region. We just set up and launched, at the COP in Glasgow in November, a green recovery financing platform. We have an ASEAN specific green finance facility that is owned by ASEAN governments that are member countries of the ADB, and there's a lot of interest in energy transition, and green bonds. There's a lot of interest in tourism-specific work. I say for the third time the pitch now, the Sustainable Tourism Hub that we just launched, but also in areas, related areas such as plastic, for example. In Indonesia, it's a pity that the minister is gone. There is the National National Plastic Action Partnership, NPAP it's called, where Indonesia is really showing the rest of the world. Other countries are copying that mechanism that brings together government on very highest level. It's supported by the government, NGOs, private sector, international organizations like ourselves, embassies, etc., on various work streams on plastic, right? On policy issues, on innovation issues, on financing issues, and as a multi-stakeholder platform, we're driving good practice, we are driving knowledge, we are helping mobilize finance for Indonesia, including in the tourism industry, and much of that is related. Plastic is always related to tourism. Some of the regulatory work, Bali has banned plastic, for example. There's community-driven work going on, working with communities in coastal areas on local tourism. We are supporting the ministry, the tourism ministry that Sandi runs. In those areas, so very receptive, and without exception almost.
Okay. On that note, I guess some final thoughts. I'm cognizant of time; we are up, but maybe we have 1 or 2 more minutes here. Liz, anything else that we haven't talked, we're not able to talk about that you'd like to get out there? Final thoughts.
I'd like to add to that final question that as PATA, we launched a tourism destination resilience program. And to your query about investment, I understand. What we are striving to do is we've deployed this in 4 different national tourism organizations to teach them what is the definition of a resilient and a sustainable destination, and identifying those potential risks. So I understand the funding is out there from great development banks like ADB, but what we need are really well-constructed proposals, identifying risks, and from the destination level, bringing those projects proposals out. And so that's part of our goal. We're deploying it. It's an open format, and it's really to teach our members and the broader market how to identify potential risks and needs for capacity building, so that we can be more sustainable into the future.
Right. So Vinny, sorry, I have to get back to you. Just a final thing before I get to Caecilia. What is that transmission mechanism? How do we get there from your level to where basically Liz says, I need that framework? Is that the formal banking sector?
We have an online, as PATA, we've deployed online training, and we've also done it in person in Indonesia, Philippines, and a couple of other markets. But it's teaching nations to pivot from destination marketing to destination management. And that's the more strategic approach.
Caecilia, final thoughts. This thing hasn't taught us the most important thing in life. Let's end on that.
Yeah, David, I think all those points are really, really great. I will just add that I think this year I am excited. This year I'm happy where we are. I'm optimistic. I think yes, we are not fully out of the pandemic yet, but I think going forward, I think this year is going to be really, really great. What the pandemic has really taught us in terms of important lessons. One thing is, of course, public health, sustainability, green, truly important. But also, I think it really shined lights on a number of the inequality issues. I think whether it's gender, whether it's socioeconomics, whether it's a variety of greater issues. And I remember beginning of March, there was 2 weeks of International Women's Day conversations, and some of those discussions are truly inspiring. I think so much awareness and improvements has actually gone into some of these issues, and so I think going forward, I think it just forms a very strong foundation for us to continue working on improving some of these inequality things. And I'm truly optimistic and excited about what this year is going to, how this year is going to unfold, and I'm sure it's going to be a great year for many of us in the travel industry.
Hopefully it is 2022, and hopefully you've heard that joke, it's not 2022. Guys, thank you so much. On that bright note, we'll leave the panel there. Thank you so much. We're a little bit over time, but I'm guessing that's not so much a problem. We'd like to thank our host, the ADB. Of course, they're Liz Ortega, Caecilia Chu, and of course, Vinny and his team there. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you learned a lot, and we'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you
day.
so much.